Hi, I'm Johnny from UltimatePaperMache.com, and in the last video I showed you how I put together a pattern to create a cardboard skull shape, very simplified skull that we can use as a base to create a realistic human face. And now I get to play with it. You didn't see it like this the last video because since then I did cover it with some duct tape. I went out to the garage and found some. It happened to be white, that's why it's kind of glaring. The reason that I use duct tape is because I'm going to be using a wet clay. You could also use this with an oil base or a wax based clay too. You could also use it with any of the armature methods that I use with my paper mache. You could use crumpled foil, you could use crumpled paper, lots of different ways that you can make a sculpture. That's one of the reasons I like sculpting so much. Now, the next step was trying to find something that I could put him on top of, just to hold him up, you know, so that I didn't have to hold him up myself. And the first thing I tried was this oatmeal box. It didn't quite work. It's just a teensy bit too big. So what it does is it flattens the guy out quite a lot. This would be okay if you wanted to sculpt a face that's really wide. But most of the time when you see a really wide face, it isn't because the bones are wider, it's because they're overweight. And then but not always. So there are times when this would really help. You could even exaggerate it if you wanted to and put some crumpled paper under there and just make a really different one. Or you could even pull it in together to make a really thin and narrow face. I'm just going to leave it the way it is, so this isn't going to work. The next thing I tried was just a mason jar, and that didn't work because it just isn't quite tall enough, so that has to go too. So what I ended up using, and I think this is going to work really well, is I used some Magic Sculpt in a rooster video that I made a couple of weeks ago. And when both of these tubs are stacked up together, this fellow just happens to fit over it. Perfect. You probably have something in the house that works just as well. So once you have your skull pattern all put together, go ahead and look around for something. It really helps if it's heavy because you don't want this sliding around or falling off on the floor, tipping over, that kind of thing when you're working. You don't want to have to worry about that stuff. You just want to play with the clay. Now, I'm not going to make a specific portrait. That would take a really long time. I don't want to, you know, have an hour-long class on how to create a clay portrait over our little skull shape. I'm not opposed to doing that someday, but for right now I just want to play, so I'm not going to make a specific guy. I just want to see if we can make a realistic face over this. And so let's get started. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to go get my clay right now and start putting some on here. Now I should mention that even though I did put plastic tape over the cardboard, I'm using wet clay, and the water in the clay is going to eventually seep through. It'll get just a little bit wrinkled under there after, if you leave it overnight, for instance. It won't have any effect at all on the clay sculpture, but if you want to use the form again, you'd probably want to use the plaster cloth over it. I'm using a wet clay that's made for creating models, and I sort of forgot to close up the bag a couple of times, so it's a lot stiffer than it normally would be when I first get it. And because it's a little stiffer than usual, I kind of wish that I had put plaster cloth over the cardboard form first. So that was a couple of hours. It doesn't look like anybody in particular because that wasn't the point, but it definitely looks human enough for my camera to recognize it because it was tracking it for a while. So I think this is really going to work. It saves a huge amount of time, and it made it a lot easier actually than using the resin skull because I didn't have to work around the holes underneath the jaw. There's just an awful lot of information that's on that skull that you never see on the finished piece. Now I know that if you're in art school, they actually want you a lot of times to start out with a skull and then add every single muscle on there. Be sure to do that if your professor wants you to. But if you just want to have fun and you just want to kind of play around with the idea of making faces, then go ahead and start out just making faces. Any face, just start putting some muscles on there, putting some skin on there, until a face pops out that you actually like, and consider that a win. And then start looking at photographs more carefully. Look at specific people and try to capture a particular mouth or a particular eye, and move slowly that way, and you'll actually get quite good at sculpting portraits too. This is not a portrait, but I think he's a pretty cool looking guy, so I'm happy with him. Now, if you would like to use this pattern, it is on my website. You can find it at ultimatepapermache.com/patterns. You just have to scroll down a bit, or just go ahead and use this link here. I'll put a live link in the description below this video, so you can download the pattern itself. I'm really excited about this. I know that I'm going to be playing around with it a lot. If you do make something with this pattern, I really hope that you'll come back to ultimatepapermache.com, click on the link for the Daily Sculptors group page. You can upload photographs of the faces that you make. I would really love to see them. So please come on and visit me, ultimatepapermache.com. I'll see you there.